So, this is a revision video for Component 2, Section B, English in the 21st Century. You should all have one of these booklets. It's pink with the Twitter symbol and the eyebrows on fleek hat. Just to remind you that the assessment objectives for this are in the booklet and they're on page 5. So as you can see, there are 3 objectives, 1, 2 and 3. So as ever, objective 1, apply appropriate methods of language analysis, that's loaded terminology and coherent written expression. Assessment 2, critical understanding of concepts and issues, so that's things such as the medium, the genre, the type of language which is used in the 21st century. And AO3, which is half the marks, analyse and evaluate how contextual factors and language features are associated with the construction of meaning. So context is your dominant assessment objective for this essay. The text that we're using is in your pack and it's on page 15 in your pack, so you will have a blank copy of this along with our video and a model answer very shortly. Today Richard's with me to discuss this text. So as you can see, it's an example of 21st century English blog posts.
And as you mentioned, Steve, context is key and it's the first bullet point on the question. So I think that's probably the first thing to notice. You'll find that when you go into the exam as well, that your bullet point will draw your attention to context factors. So what do we think the context factors are for a text like this, Steve?
Well, it's online communication. So we have to think, well, and it says it's blog posts, although it looks to me like it's comments in response to a blog.
Yeah. So we're thinking online, so we're talking multimodal.
Yep.
So people have typed this, but giving it various degrees of spoken features. So that's right off the start, something you can be focusing on, isn't it? As soon as you're talking online communication, you're thinking multimodal, how much have we got of the spoken features? Some useful terms here, I think, to start with are constraints and affordances. If you're not sure about those, go back to your revision notes. What would we say were constraints on this kind of communication? What would you be chipping in there, Steve?
Well, I'm thinking, first of all, you don't have immediate feedback. So it's written, you're on your own machine or your phone writing this, and although you do have quite quick feedback, you don't have any visual hints, no paralinguistic features or those kind of things of face-to-face discourse.
And I think that leads to some of the features we see, doesn't it? Some of the attitudes to readers or listeners or whatever we're going to call them, receivers, which vary interestingly in these 3 posts. And I think the fact the board have selected these 3 is pushing us towards talking about different registers, different kinds of formality, different kinds of politeness.
And it seems to be a feature of the things that the exam board have given us tend to be sort of mini corpus type sets of data. I mean, they might not be, but you're certainly looking for variation within the text as well as, instead of coming up with some kind of sweeping statements about blogs.
Yeah.
Look at the data.
Yeah. So I suppose an exam technique point there is, even though there's no AO4 for comparison on this question, you've got 3 separate chunks to the data, and comparing them is going to lead you to good analysis.
Absolutely.
So I would definitely recommend comparing features within these 3. One thing that struck me about these, one of the differences between them, so a comparison to start with, is how much emotion people are expressing, how much of themselves they're revealing. So starting at the bottom, and of course that would be the first one, so there's a concept for you as well. Starting at the bottom, I think Synom 9b is showing a little bit of their personality and a little bit of their history with this person did a bad thing to me, which I won't go into. So they're kind of teasing the reader a little bit but expressing something of their personality there as well.
Absolutely. In online communication, that's a key thing, isn't it? Especially in all these social media forms, is that people do express their feelings, their ideas, their emotions. It's something that we're all familiar with now, I think.
That comes across a bit in the colloquialisms, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
The non-standard lexis that Synom 9B is choosing.
Absolutely. There's quite a few things. There's references to, the phrases in inverted commas, like look me up, use of I dialect, the je clue.
That's really interesting, because that's
Parentheses.
deliberately lowering the register, isn't it? It's no easier than writing Y-O-U-R.
Oh, no.
One character. But that's a deliberate indication of lowering the register, so reaching out to the reader in some way.
Yeah, and creating an online identity. Yeah.
I think the first two words, about time, it's another idiom, very colloquial, conversational.
Double exclamation mark, non-standard.
It's kind of trying to create a bond with the reader, isn't it?
Yeah.
Assuming that they're going to share this feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do we think about the word psycho, which really jumps out there? It's a strong word, and it's also followed by that ellipsis, ... which draws more attention to it. Would we get drawn into writing about the connotations there?
Well, certainly combined with loonies and stalkers.
Yeah, you've got a field, haven't you?
You've got a whole set of ideas of sort of dangerous behaviour online, and that the kind of the lack of security, which seems to be a theme in the whole thread as well. So you could talk about connotations. You could talk about the use the cyberspace, which is quite an old-fashioned term now.
Yes.
And as our references to MySpace and Bebo.
Who remembers that?
Yeah, who remembers those? But there is a kind of the whole idea that online communication can be a dangerous and threatening environment.
I think there's an interesting little twist into formality. Just here, where Synom 9B is talking about regulations, they switch suddenly from saying psycho, loonies, stalkers, and then you've got this passive verb construction, were adhered to. And that's just a bit of legalese, isn't it, I think? Interesting flip.
I think that's this one seems to be the most mixed register piece of the three.
And then doormat goes much more formal, and angry blackbird the opposite. So what's the key context thing on doormat? They're a teacher.
As you can see from the references to KS3 pupils and CPS should instruct social networkers, and these kind of I have to teach this basic e-safety message. So you've got that whole idea that they're having a kind of quite protective position.
They are. And rather sweetly they write in entirely standard English with carefully formulated and punctuated sentences.
Which is a big thing to remember when you're talking about social media, that not everybody does anything. No, there's always variation,
absolutely,
as in any kind of text.
If you're looking for subtleties here, you might pick out the contractions of the negative verbs. So you don't instead of do not, I didn't instead of did not, and who wouldn't. So those are the only concessions to informality, I think, in doormat. But they're there, and that's maybe something to do with the genre, to bring us right back to the beginning.
Absolutely.
Shall we get on to Angry Blackbird?
Yes, Angry Blackbird. Well, you could argue that Angry Blackbird it's almost trolling, isn't it?
Yes.
There's certainly perhaps that idea that you can just express your opinions in as obnoxious a way as you like online from the security of your own laptop. And this is pretty expressive and the most non-standard, in particular some of their rhetorical questions, for example, to begin with.
And the face-threatening acts.
Absolutely.
A really useful bit of language concept to use here. Oh, come on, get real. Those bold imperatives. There are no hedges.
No. So-called victims, which is demeaning to a whole everybody who may have been affected, as Synom 9B seems to have been. Yeah. And
like you say, you do the phrase.
the shitsy no-lifers. Yeah, pre-modified derogatory noun phrase. Yeah, with shitsy being your adjective there.
Interestingly made up as far as we're aware.
Yeah, we don't know if that's a real standard English, certainly.
There's so much to say about these 3 short texts. But don't forget, if this shows on camera, you may wish to draw on your own examples. So for everything we've said, you students are probably aware of similar things that you've received or even written yourself. Do bring in your own examples as well.
Absolutely.
You can build on what you're saying about, for instance, formality, a relationship with the reader.
And you've probably got some of those from your coursework. Many of you would have studied social media in your coursework, or just by looking at your phone, you can get examples of this. The other thing I think we've got, other things you might talk about, you've certainly got a whole field of online terminology that's here, references to e-safety, stalking, profiling, blocking, replying, reporting, abuse, all of those things which are everyday or nouns and verbs that we would use when we're talking about an online discourse. So there's lots of things you could talk about.
And remember, English in the 21st century, so coinages, such as
the
Shitsy, but also names of platforms like Bebo, Facebook. You'll get reward for considering how words like Facebook were formed and what their connotations are.
Yeah, as you can see, MySpace and Facebook,
yes,
both compounds, aren't they?
Yeah, and both lowercase. Interestingly, how is that meant to make them friendlier? You're spoilt with a question like this. There's so much to get your teeth into.
Absolutely.